It is exactly 12:31. This is the mid-morning show with me, Julie Ali, and I'm so blessed because by way of this show, I truly meet the most amazing people. I get to interview leaders in our community with the most amazing messages. One of those people is none other than you, Seth Naicker. You're a pastor, you're a Heartlines facilitator, and also a leadership consultant. And of course, it's not the first time you've been on the show. So lovely to have you back. A very good afternoon to you and welcome.
Good afternoon to you, Julie, and to the listeners at Sala Media. And also today, I'm grateful that we can talk on Interfaith Harmony Week, linking to Heartlines as well as the Interfaith Action Collective.
Okay, so we do know that World Interfaith Harmony Week is observed globally. What does this week mean specifically in the South African context, given our history and our current challenges?
Well, in the here and now context, it means that we have an opportunity to reflect and consider how we may, according to the call of the Interfaith Harmony Week, be in dialogue with one another, from the so-called different religious perspectives that we hold, different faith perspectives that we hold. And when we think about the context of our country, even in my own tradition as a Christian, one document that has been important to me, Julie, is the Kairos document. And this document has inspired global movement for social justice. And at the time that the document came out, I believe in 1985, thereabouts, this document was a document that was acknowledged by people of different faith in our own country's context. And when I think of colleagues of mine like Dr. Alan Busak, Dr. Farid Isak, these were people that were of different religions, different faith perspectives, but working together for one common good and common goal. And this was for the freedom of our country. And I think right now, as we look into our year and now, where is it that we, as people of different religious traditions, different faith perspectives, need to work with one another, building bridges towards positive values-based social impact, and also around social justice and preventing and ending gender-based violence.
Okay, now the theme speaks about moving from prayer to action. What does meaningful action look like when faith communities come together?
Well, I'm blessed. Last week, I joined Heartlines with an organization called Rose Castle, and Rose Castle comes out of the UK, and they presented to us as a cohort of learners such an amazing process, and they call it scriptural reading or sacred scriptural reading. Julie, what's exciting is they have interfaith engagements where people of different faith come together and read from their sacred texts. So can you imagine a Christian reading from a Bible, a Muslim reading from a Quran, a Hindu person reading from a Bhagavad Gita? These are the religious texts. A Jewish person reading from their Torah. And in that light, connecting and looking at gifts of the sacred texts that would actually help them to be in dialogue. So, Julie, I mean, prayer to action, it means that from our religious perspectives and our religious texts, it calls us to do the work that we can to make a positive impact in the way of our service of our country, the service of our community. So, for example, at Heartlines, I do a lot of work around positive masculinity and the work of positive, active presence of men and fathers in the lives of their children, their families, and communities. And this is a focus on, how can men be more healthy in who they are as servant leaders, as husbands, as fathers, as community leaders, especially in light of what we see happening with the absent father scenario or absent father syndrome. And can you imagine that faith communities, like we've done work with the national shelter movement last year, had faith leaders gathering across from different faith traditions to say, how can we put this as an educational insight to help families? How are we helping families? By actually helping men to be better at who they are in managing their emotions, managing their practices, managing their behaviors with their family. And ultimately, through this work, can you imagine, we may have the potential to make some impact, positive impact around the scenario of healthy families, preventing and ending gender-based violence. So this is where the connection is. As we pray, what does prayer call us to do? Prayer calls us to move into action for the here and now issues that we believe God wants us and inspires us to make a difference in.
We are seeing strong collaboration between different faith groups during this particular week. Why is interfaith cooperation more important now than ever before?
Well, I mean, in the global geopolitical situation of the world, I think we may have noticed over the last 2-3 years, maybe a little bit longer, there is definitely a polarization that's going on. And if I remain true to our South African story, I believe there is a lot of positives that will allow people to understand that religious communities can actually exist in unity. Yes, we may have our differences, as we must. We have different theologies, we have different ways of worship, we have different ways of understanding God. But what can we unite in? We can unite in how our sacred texts, our prayer, our spiritual practices, our understandings start to build together. And when I'm saying that respectfully in light of what we see happening, for example, in light of the Congo, in light of the Sudan, in light of Nigeria, in light of Palestine, where people have utilized unhealthy theological thinking to be a pressure point upon which they've built, Zionism. They've built a faith tradition that actually says it's okay to occupy, it's okay to practice genocide. So this is why I believe it is important, because when people of different religious traditions and faith perspectives get together, Julie, they have an interface and an interfaith experience. Your understanding links in with my understanding. Your practices links in. We get to actually talk about our differences instead of picking up, arms and starting to war against one another.
Love what you've just shared with me now. Also, Pastor, many religious traditions, thankfully, thank God, share similar core values, don't they? I mean, I'm Muslim, you're Christian, but when we sit down and talk about our faith, and I share with you and you share with me, we realize that our core values like justice, dignity, and compassion are there in all of the religions. How can these shared values help bridge divides in our communities?
For many years, I've worked with the organization of Heartlines, and I'm grateful because in that space, Julie, I work with a lot of churches in the church mobilization team and the community mobilization team. And we've taken largely what is faith-inspired values into productions of films. Like if you watch one of our Heartlines films on the Fathers Matter campaign, it's called Family Portrait, one of the earliest short films, 22 minutes at length, but it's got values-based teachings written into a script. And these teachings now can be watched in a storyline, in a short film. And why are stories so powerful in this way? And imagine stitching values or designing values into stories. As people watch it, they laugh, they smile, they track with the character. And while they're there, can you imagine a movie can have impact on the way a person thinks? So, Julie, that's what we've done in the Heartline space. I watched ourselves taking some bit of that story fashioning and the story piece into the work we did with the Interfaith Collective to end gender-based violence. At every consultation that we did with our leaders or steering committee or our Faith Leaders Gender Transformation Program, we begin with a story approach. And in our story sharing, we find out, well, listen, why we do what we do is based on the values that we uphold. Now, if we talk about a value of compassion, a value of mercy, a value of love, these are good values. And if we can embed those values as, this is our belief and we practice what we preach. So, Julie, when it comes to our values alignment, we can align with values and say, listen, on these values, we can clean up our streets. On these values, we can fix up our waterworks. On these values, we can make sure that our communities are safer. While we may differ in our religious perspectives, differ in our religious traditions, differ in our ways of singing or worship or prayer, the values bring a common ground upon which we can say, listen, here's the ground upon which we can work for the well-being of our children, the well-being of our families, the well-being of our communities. Let me say one other thing about values. In my tradition as a Christian and my faith way, I would read my Bible, and as I read my Bible, the sacred text would speak to me of insights, inspired insights, wisdom, literature, etc. But Julie, can you imagine that sometimes I've had to look at my biblical text and say, listen, that text is tough to deal with. Now, those that have done Bible training and theological studies, and as I've worked in the interfaith sector and the faith action to end gender-based violence sector, Dr. Nontando Adebo would say, these texts that are troublesome to the rights of women, to the rights of arguments that seem to be propaganda-based and irregularly understood, we must call them what they are. And the genre that we'll call them is texts of terror. Can you imagine an interfaith dialogue happening, or people of different faiths gathering around a table, looking at texts that people have misunderstandings upon, and we come to clarity and say, hang on, the broader narrative of our religious tradition, of our faith perspective, does not support that bias. The broader narrative of our religious understanding, our faith position, does not support that prejudice. The broader understanding of our religious perspective, of our faith practice, does not support that injustice. So then we can say, listen, that sacred text, we have to call it what it is. It requires a different way of exegesis. It requires a different way of analyzing the text to understand how do we draw out of this tough text. Why I'm saying that's important, Julie, because on Interfaith Week, as we celebrate and commemorate the February 1st to the 7th, we must have the critical awareness to say, listen, if this is what you're teaching and this doesn't sound right in the broader narrative of love, in the broader narrative of compassion, in the broader narrative of justice, then we're going to have to say, listen, that teaching, we have to park it. We have to analyze it in a way to say, how do we draw from it? Or do we say that it is a text of terror? And those values are not part of the broader narrative of our faith teaching and our faith belief.
And can you just imagine, before I go for an ad break, I do need to make this comment, that when we have these interfaith discussions, we come to the realization that we all have very strong shared values of compassion, of support, of humility, of empathy. We wouldn't have these unnecessary wars. And, it's just all about greed and power, because that's where the disruption is all coming from, is this absolute ugly greed and this want of immense power so that you can be in control and the rest are your subjects. Hold that thought. We'll talk some more right after the ad break.
Advisory services from an award-winning firm? Look no further than the Belmont Mayer Group, your gateway to unparalleled investment and wealth management. At Belmont Mayer, we believe in the art of wealth creation, a meticulous process fueled by our unwavering commitment to excellence. With a focus on providing elite alternative investments and quality advice, we also pride ourselves on maximizing value for our esteemed investors, as seen through our consistent outperformance. Your financial success is our top priority. Join us at Belmont Mayor and experience the difference firsthand. Ready to embark on a journey of greatness? Contact us today. Reach out to the Belmont Mayor Group on 078 786 1698. Call or WhatsApp or email us at info@belmontmayor.com. Elevate your financial future with Belmont Mayor, where every detail matters.
Discover the Africa of your dreams and surround yourself with her spectacular beauty. Relax beneath her serene sunsets and explore wildlife at its natural best. It's where the pride of Africa comes together. The Kwantu Private Game Reserve. Get to know the Big Five or cruise on an elephant safari game drive. Interact with lion and tiger cubs and enjoy world-class halal cuisine while we pamper you during your 5-star stay. Indulge in the true African experience. For reservations, call now on 042-203-1400 or visit kwantu.co.za. The Kwantu Private Game Reserve, the place of gathering.
World-class financial services only at Sapphire Global, your financial partner. If you are looking for Islamic, Sharia, and ethical financial products, look no further. Sapphire Global offers a wide range of financial service offerings from short-term to life and investments. A full-service center with all financial requirements under one brand. Our highly skilled and experienced consultants are ready to help protect your financial future. Contact us on 041 001 0184 or visit our website on www.sapphireglobalfs.com. Sapphire Global is an authorized financial services provider.
With Ashraful Aid this Ramadan, your zakat changes lives. It feeds families facing hunger, restores dignity to those in need, and brings hope where it is needed most. From food relief to essential support, your zakah reaches communities with care, transparency, and impact. Give with confidence, give with trust. Make your zakah count this Ramadan. Give your zakah to Ashraful Aid and help change lives today.
Kids these days are smart, and when you're competing for their attention against their smartphones, you need to make smart choices, like using Sunfoil triple refined pure sunflower oil in every meal you make. It's naturally cholesterol-free and approved by the Heart and Stroke Foundation as part of a balanced eating plan. So whether you're cooking, frying, or baking, you get the great tasting results that'll get their attention faster than the latest app. And if that doesn't work, change the Wi-Fi password. Sunfoil. Now we're cooking.
Rejuvenating media day by day. This is Salam Media.
Welcome back. I'm talking with Pastor Seth Naicker. He's a Heartlines facilitator and also a leadership consultant. We are talking about faith communities getting together and driving peace. And we've had a very interesting discussion up to now, but I'm not sure if we still have Pastor Seth Naicker on the line. He seems to have disappeared. So let's see if we can reconnect. In the meantime, we'll take a quick ad break as well, and then we'll try and reconnect because there are a few important questions that still needs to be answered. I'm thinking, like, for example, listeners who may feel that interfaith work is abstract or symbolic. And a lot of us do think it's just symbolic. And I'm wondering what sort of examples will the pastor share with us about these collaborations, about how they translate into real impact on the ground. You're back, Seth. I was afraid we'd lost you there. Welcome back.
Apologies, sorry, my Wi-Fi decided to take a breather.
Okay, no worries. Just before the ad break, I made a comment about greed and power. And I just realized that when we look at this phenomena of greed and power, which seems to be driving world leaders and people in high places, it really talks to about them being narcissistic, does it not? Seth?
Yeah, narcissism is a conditioning, that we shouldn't be upholding, Julie. In a faith environment, we shouldn't be encouraging, the narcissistic realities that people are carrying with them. But it is,
But sadly, it's there. Sadly,
it
it's there.
it
Stares us
is
in
it
the
is, and
face.
it can happen, and it can happen without being checked, or it can happen with accountability. So, for example, in a very humble way and in a real way, I have to be careful as a pastor that I don't make it all about me when I'm working in the context of my church or with our people. And unfortunately, I think this is important, that pastors and religious leaders, whether you are in the Muslim tradition, Jewish tradition, Hindu tradition, Baha'i, wherever it is that you find yourself. Some spaces would even say to you, well, but we've configured our faith space, not to be about a one person scenario. But it does pop up, like, you hear about the man of God, the one man of God. Who's the man of God for this moment? Well, in the literature, when you talk about ethical leadership, it also pops up in academic articles, where across Africa we talk about the strong man concept. So narcissism can move in where we talk about toxic masculinity. I've also heard people say, well, we also have to watch about any power system that turns itself into play of power. And then once you access power, you act out in ways of control, and you just use that on greed and control. So as a minister who has been trained in issues of values-based social justice and reconciliation, Julie, I would say that we should be analytical and aware of the 3 P's, right? Not P's that you have in a chicken curry, but the 3 P's as in power, privilege, and positionality. These P's, as I identify, what does my identity give me access to, that would relate to power? And at certain times, I may be a little bit powerless, and at other times, more powerful. So, in my own context as a South African, I'm educated. Does that give me power? I have not just one degree, I've got advanced degrees. So I analyze. I have language in a South African context, and you speak English in many spaces. English is a language of access and power. So what is it that we identify as it gives us access to power? And then we have to become aware of what happens in the context of a racialized world, a class biased world, a gender biased world. And in my readings of kind of a faith and mystic activist, Howard Thurman, I draw from those teachings where we become aware, unusually aware, about the fact that these identities, the race, class, and gender identities, are at least 3 tiers where we see power being used irregularly, Julie. So yes, as we say, you can see it in politics today, globally. You can
Absolutely.
see it in a local context at the church. But we have to be the ones that say, listen, we want to have much more a collaborative, collective approach. We want to be grounded in Ubuntu. It's great proverbial that we talk about, but a philosophy or a proverbial teaching of Ubuntu, you can find that Ubuntu, a spirit of togetherness, it exists within our faith traditions. In Christian terms, we would talk about unity. We would talk about reconciliation. We would talk about compassion, care. You mentioned empathy. This is what the goodness of our faith traditions, the good values that are there. So we have to, in a way, be clear, unusually clear, that kind of selfish, that kind of narcissistic, approaches to life where it's all about you, it's your way or the highway, that cannot exist in the context of a healthy environment that uses faith and the values that we draw out of faith in our everyday workings and teachings and serving, the people that we are called to serve.
Okay, we're almost come to the end of the interview. Let me ask you this question. That was pretty heavy when we spoke about narcissism or narcissistic behavior. Are these a type of issues that get discussed at these Interfaith Harmony Weeks as well? Are these is something like this put on the table and discussed, or is it just really about, with due respect, about do you kind of just really focus on the feel good issues?
Julie, I would hope that we would have courage that comes from our faith. It's also a value. Courage does come in my own tradition, and as I would read, prophetic scripture of Prophet Micah 6:8 would say to us, "Act justly, love mercy, and walk humbly with God." In Abrahamic traditions, we can all study that text. In other religious traditions, maybe they don't have the exact text on Micah, but they would have some notions of their faith tradition or their sacred texts that speak to care, compassion, well-being. So and courage, more especially courage. So I'd say that I believe that, I don't know what other people do, but in the context of like the work that I do with Heartlines, we are courageously ensuring that the people that we're working with, the men that we are working with in the Father's Matter work, become men who know what it means to serve their families.
Okay,
In the
my
interfaith,
final, pardon, I've got to wrap up now. Let me just
yes.
quickly put in this final question and then we can wrap up. Looking beyond this week, because it is really about the Interfaith Week, is it not? How do we sustain interfaith dialogue and action throughout the year so that harmony becomes a lived reality and not just an annual event?
Well, Julie, I would submit to our colleagues here in South Africa and possibly across Africa and those who have access. The Interfaith Action Collective to End Gender-Based Violence is a beautiful space to connect to. We have a Facebook page that people can connect with, where people of different religious traditions are focusing on preventing and ending gender-based violence. In the world of Heartlines, we have an app that many people from different religious traditions around the positive active presence of men are connecting with the Father's Matter coach that is helping men that are from different religious traditions just on coaching insights on how to be more positive and more active and present as a man, a father, a son in our society. Julie, there are many
And I
other
am
opportunities. But
right.
thank you,
I am.
and I know it's time, so thank you to you and your listeners.
Okay, I do want to have a future interview with you on toxic and positive masculinity. I think it's a conversation that needs to be had. We need to air that. But thank you indeed for, gosh, just the work you do and the passion with which you embrace your work. You go well, God bless, and I hope to talk
Thank
again
you,
soon.
shukran, siyabonga.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you indeed for being with us on the show today. Till the next time, which for me is Monday morning at 8 o'clock on the News and Views show. Take it easy, take care on the roads, and Khudafiz from me, Julie Ali.